music unfolds in time, and so all music has an integral relation with time, and it is structured, or every kind of music is structured in time in a certain manner. Now in Indian classical music, the two fundamental principles of time are Laya and Tala. Now Laya can be roughly and superficially translated as tempo or speed. So I can talk to you at a slow pace, or I can talk to you at a fast speed. So Laya is one aspect of how music unfolds in time. Simply we have slow music and fast music. But this principle, Laya, is a very general and loose principle. It is critical, it's all pervasive, but it is not rigorous. It's not very precise and very specific. That is something that Tala does. Tala brings music together in time with more rigor. That is, to be more specific, Tala organizes the music in cycles of a specific measure of time divided into a certain number of units. And so we can speak of the music as unfolding in cycles of a time measure. Now, right away we can make the observation here that while Laya is more or less a universal principle of all music, Tala is not so. Tala is quite is not found in all music. Certainly, it's definitely a very important principle in Indian classical music. Now let me demonstrate a bit. Now this is the first line of a very well-known composition in khayal, and this composition is brought together in a tal called Teen Tal, which has 16 units. So it's like this then. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Ni pa re sa. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. So this is the Tala cycle in which this composition is set. That is, the composition is brought together, structured in Teen Tal of 16 units. It's a cycle, time cycle of 16 units. That is, it's a certain time span. In this case, maybe it is 6 to 8 seconds. It can be more or less, but it has to be steady for some time at least. And this time span is divided into 16 units and it is repeated cyclically. So these are very fundamental to any Tala at all, whether it's Carnatic music or Hindustani music or Dhrupad or khayal or instrumental music or thumri for that matter. That is, there is a time span divided into a certain number of units and this is repeated cyclically. Now before we talk more about Tala, let us listen to a khayal rendition. And I would urge you to try to follow the time. The Tala here, the time cycle is divided into 7 units and the Tala is called Rupak. The rendition, the performance is in the rag Bhimpalas. Let us listen and try to follow the Tal.
Yedana Danarano Ranga Paga Ayo Ranga Paga Oh Ranga Paga Ranga 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 Pagavayo Oh Ranga Paga Saki Sabake Saki Sabake Ayo Ranga बसिया मेरो मन रसिया रे मे मंदर रंग पागवायो ओ रंग Ranga Bhaga Ranga Ye Ranga Bhaga Saki sab khele Saki sab khele Ayo ranga bhaga Saki sab khele Mero mana रसिया मेरो मन रसिया raga pa ga ma ma saba ranga ghole saba Sabaranga ghole, sabaranga ghole, sabaranga ghole, dhuma machaya ga sabaranga ghole, dhuma machaya कैसे तुम बिना कैसे खेलूं उलंग रवायो रंग गवायो ओ रंग ranga ghole sabaranga ghole dhuma machayo tuma bina kaise tuma bina kaise
So you would have noticed that the singer was interacting with the tabla player on his right and the harmonium player on the left. And besides, of course, we have two tanpuras providing a tonal canvas. Now, this is a typical ensemble for a khayal concert. That is, it is small, it has a lead vocalist, a melodic accompaniment, which is in this case it's harmonium. It could also be sarangi, another instrument, and then you have a tabla accompaniment providing the percussive accompaniment, and you have the tanpuras. Now I'll just quickly go over the rag that you heard, since we have extensively looked at ragas and their lakshanas. I'll just quickly go over Bhimpalas, which is a rag that you heard for you. Now this is an early evening or late afternoon raga. Let us say its time could be something between 2 and 5. That is when it is ideally performed, and it is a It is an Audava Sampurna Raga. What does that mean? Audava means it has 5 swaras in the Aroha and Sampurna. Therefore, all the 7 notes occur in the Avaroha or the descent. And it belongs to it's classified under the Kafi That, which has Ga and Mi Komal, the rest are Shuddha. So the Aroha Avaroha is something like this of Bhimpalas. Ni sa ga ma pa ni sa ni da pa ma ga re sa ni sa ga re sa ni sa ni da pa ni sa. So this is the Aroha Avaroha. Ma is a very important swara. Ma and Sa are the Vadi Sambadi. Now the composition that you heard had the words Ayu Rangafaga. So it's obviously a description of Holi. It's on the occasion of Holi. The composition is set in the context of Holi, which is the festival of colors. And you would have also noticed that Bhuvanesh Komkali, who performed this piece, he improvised around the bandish, around the composition. And so the elements of a typical performance of khayal are the bandish, of course, which is the composition, which is always in a particular raga and in a particular tala. Then you have improvisation around that bandish, which is called vistar and badhat or upaj. And you have sangat or accompaniment. I mean, this is all too neat a kind of categorization of the elements, but and there's a lot of overlap. But for the purposes of conveying what happens in a khayal performance, this will work. Now, appreciating a khayal performance is about saying how these come together. So, while raga, bandish, and improvisation can be seen as the content of the music, Laya and Tala are critical in bringing the performance together into a coherent whole, to give it some structure. They bring structure to the presentation. But you really can't speak of the bandish as separate from the tal, because the bandish brings structure because of its being set in tal, or rather the tal enters a picture through the bandish or composition. Now, how about Laya? Laya, as I mentioned before, is indispensable to all music. Tala is not. Even in Indian classical or Hindustani music, much of Dhrupad presentation does not involve Tala. That is, we have an extensive alap or improvisation before a composition in any rendition of Dhrupad, and even in instrumental music for that matter. And this improvisation, alap as it is called, is performed without tala. But Laya is very much a critical presence. Contemporary khayal performance, however, unfolds for most part in tala. So let us look at Laya and tala in some detail now. So as I said, Laya can be superficially translated as tempo, and it is that really. We do talk of tempo as Laya, that is a word used. So now one can render the same tala, for instance, slowly or in a medium speed or fast. And we use the words vilambit, madhya and druta to indicate these 3 layers. Vilambit means slow, madhya means medium tempo, and druta means fast tempo. Now, these speeds, the Laya itself is not determined or controlled by any automated device or any objective criteria. It is grounded in musical subjectivity. And really, the Laya faculty, it is one that the musician has to hone and develop. So just as we work on sur or tunefulness, musicians have to work on honing their Laya sense. That is equally important. Now, another important thing to bear in mind here is that when we speak of Vilambit, Madhya, Drut, that is slow, medium, fast. What is slow? What is medium? There is no objective range that is agreed upon in the community as being Vilambit or Madhya or Drut. There is a broad understanding, and in fact, one gharana or one school of music, their Vilambit may not be the Vilambit of another school. So it is in a sense relative. This Laya, differentiating the Laya as Vilambit, Madhya and Druta is not quite, there's nothing absolute about it, it is relative. Though there is a broad consensus. Now, Laya then means tempo or the speed of the tala. There is a space between two units of the tala. That is the description of Laya in the textual tradition. So we have, say, Tin Tal that we saw earlier. So it has 1, 2, 3, 4 and so on, 16. So it can be at that speed, or it can be 1, 2, 3 and so on, or it can be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 and so on. So Laya in the context of tala makes sense. That is, it is just the tempo or the speed of the tala. And we have these broad ranges which we call as Vilambit, Madhya and Drut. But this Laya is subtler too. That is, even where we don't have tala, in Laya is very critical, is very important. There is the internal spacing in phrases, for instance, even when there is no tala. That is an aspect of Laya. And when phrases are linked and brought together in improvisation, there too Laya is a critical factor. In fact, Laya is one of the subtlest aspects of this Laya is one of the subtlest aspects of music. And when Laya is right, then conditions are right for soaring to heights in music making. But it is an elusive thing, and it's a matter for experience. And so in what follows, when I speak of Laya, it's mostly in the sense of tempo. Now Tala, what is Tala? Tala is the more rigorous time principle. That is, it organizes the music more precisely in time. We have about half a dozen widely used talas, and each of them can be in different layas. So we saw Teen Tal earlier, 1, 2, 3, 4 as I demonstrated earlier. It can be faster or it can be slower. And so we can have Vilambit Teen Tal, Madhya Laya Teen Tal and Drut Teen Tal. And there are even ranges that overlap between between two of these ranges. That is, we may say Madhya Vilambit or Madhya Drut and so on. So neither here nor there. That kind of descriptions also we do encounter. So what is Tala then? Tala is a cyclical time measure divided into a certain number of units, and these units are called matras. Matra, each unit is called one matra. So when I said Teen Tal is divided into 16 units, the way we say it is that Teen Tal has 16 matras. Now, Tala is not happily translated as rhythm. Rhythmic variation, etc., happens within Tala. So the core idea of Tala is that it's a certain span of time. It is grounded in subjective experience, but yet shared by all performers on stage. And that time span is divided into units and is repeated cyclically. Now, when I say Tala is a time span, it does not mean that for every Tala there is one time span, as we saw. It can be Vilambit, it can be Madhya, it can be Drut. And in fact, in Hindustani music, we have a very wide range from very long time spans to very short ones. So, every Tala is then divided into a certain number of units, each of which is called a matra. Now, what is a matra is again often, translated as beats. So, when we say Teen Tal has 16 matras, it's sometimes translated as Teen Tal has 16 beats. But again, a beat is, typically a pulse. It marks an emphasis. And this is not true of all matras. We may not often experience foot tapping rhythm in a Hindustani concert. That is not what is sought. So, the music, the song, or even the tabla does not mark each of these matras with uniform emphasis. So, it's misleading to call the matra a beat. In fact, we will soon see that just like in a raga, not all swaras are equal. So also in a tala, not all matras are equal. Now, each cycle of the tala, of any tala, is called an avartana. And the idea of returning to the first matra of the tala cycle is critical to the presentation of Hindustani music. And this, that is the first matra of every tala, is called the sam. So now we have some basic terminology in the context of Tala. We have Laya, tempo, and we have three broad tempos. Tala, which is a cyclic time measure divided into a certain number of units. We have about half a dozen widely used talas in khayal and dhrupad each. And then we have matra, which is the unit of every tala is called a matra. So then we say Teen Tal has 16 matras, or some other tal has 12 matras, and so on. And as I said, there are about 6 or 7 popularly widely performed talas. Now, avartana is every cycle of tala is called one avartana. So we can say Teen Tal has an avartana of 16 matras. And then we have sam, which is the first matra of every tal, and it is particularly important in the presentation of khayal or dhrupad or instrumental music for that matter. Now to return to the performance that we watched in the beginning of this video. The tala that the bandish was set in is rupak, as I said, and it's a cycle of 7 matras. So each avartana of the tal rupak has 7 matras. The sum is of course the first matra. Perhaps you could go back to the rendition of Bhimlas and try to follow the music through tala armed with whatever we have covered in this lesson, and try to listen again. That is, you see, this is the crux of appreciating khayal, you to follow the tala. Of course, if you understand raga, that's a great thing, but knowing ragas is only half the joy of appreciating khayal. You have to be able to follow the tal, and we will look at this later. Now here in this rendition, the bandish starts on the fourth matra. So you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, right? So the bandish starts on the fourth matra, and the first matra or the sum is where we hear the word faga. I'll demonstrate it for you, and then you have to go back and listen to Bhuvanesh Komkali's rendition. One, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3. Ayo ranga bhaga, ayo ranga bhaga. So that is the first line of the bandish, and most of the improvisation happens around this line. So do go back and listen to the rendition and try to follow the tala.